Content warnings for this video are going to include things like referencing to self-harming behavior, in addition to themes of harassment and mentions of parental death. Please take your own mental health into consideration before continuing this video. This is in addition to the previous recorded script to include new information, mostly so people who are only going to watch about 10 to 20 minutes of this video aren't going to spam me in the comments section about stuff that I'm well aware of. I am aware of the note that James had posted on his private Twitter account prior to deleting said account in the beginning of March, which is what caused this video in particular to be massively delayed in the first place. I wanted to let the situation develop further before posting in case the worst case scenario didn't end up happening. After all, there's no point in posting constructive feedback for a person that's no longer with us. That being said, Harry's producer Kat has confirmed that James is safe and alive, which is a collective sigh of relief for everyone who is actually a decent human being. Despite his actions, James has never deserved death. It is obvious through that note that the situation has put him in bad headspace, which is completely understandable. I mentioned it within the content of this video, which was recorded and scripted prior to that note, that I think James needs to take a massive step back from his social media presence and platforms and everything related to the internet in general, honestly. This might be repetitive for later segments for those that stick around for the entire video, but I firmly believe that James should be turning off the comment section to his YouTube channel for now, even if there is a possibility that James had made that note as a quote-unquote abusive baiting tactic towards his detractors, as I've seen rumors floating around of people believing that to be the case. It's not really our job to determine how serious he was with that threat towards himself. There were segments in this video that I scrutinized his behavior relating to threats of self-harm and people doxing him and things like that. I'm debating which parts of that I'm going to keep in versus edit out, which I guess you might not even know if I end up editing out parts of those things, but I'm going to try my best to keep the thought flow process within the video pretty understandable. So if there's segments that just seem kind of choppy, that you don't know what point A to point B because you're at point C now ended up happening, it's probably because I changed my opinion about something due to James's almost current actions, and I just wanted to edit that out. But I'm going to try to keep in as much as I can just for clarity's sake of my initial thought process with everything. Again, we can all hope that James is safe and well and continues to be so. Despite my opinions on his behavior, I am under the firm belief that his own actions led people to doubt him in the manner in which they did towards his note, and he should be working on his mental health with professionals that can assist him with not only his self-harming ideations, but also his behavior that led up to the point of the plagiarism video that Harry ended up doing. It will take a while for James to build up the trust within his audience once again, but I'm confident that he's capable, and with the right help and support, that he can become who he really wanted to be all along, a shining voice for the LGBT community and an advocate for those who just can't advocate for themselves anymore, unfortunately. He has a long way to go, but I'm optimistic, basically, that he could, in fact, learn from his behavior, grow and change, because at the end of the day, as serious as the plagiarism was, it is not the most serious thing and most damnable offense that people have done on YouTube, which I do mention more of that later. I'll get into it more in the video. But for now, please be a little lenient with not only James due to, what's going on with him right now, even if you are among that group of people that, don't want to be, just be polite in the comments section, and, I guess we're going to get into the video that I've already pre-recorded and mostly edited now, so enjoy. A little while ago, hbomberguy released a video discussing the prevalence of plagiarism on YouTube. During this video, he highlighted key examples of people monetizing their stolen content, creators like The Internet Historian and Cinemassacre, for example, and the consequences they face because of the actions of themselves or members of their teams. He even went into great detail in regards to Illuminati's extensive plagiarism and how she tried to gaslight not only him but her entire audience into thinking what she was doing was just misquoting a few sources. I could go on an entire like comical video rant about the situation with Blair, reusing my voice lines of the video that I did on her already about how she doesn't even participate in making her own content beyond just reading the script that someone else makes for her, but honestly, this video isn't about her.
This video is about James Somerton.
In hbomberguy's plagiarism video, he ends up spending a good chunk of the 4-hour runtime discussing once iconic queer video essayist James Somerton and how most of his content had been heavily ripped off from other creators, a vast majority of those being smaller queer creators. And just to clarify, Harry went into detail about James Somerton's video essays, not so much the content that he was producing prior to video essays, just to, again, clarify. It is possible that even more of his content has been plagiarized that we even know of, but it's common for discussions revolving around queer issues just to be kind of scrubbed from the internet at large, so some of the sources, unfortunately, have been kind of just lost to the ether. Hey there, I'm here to interrupt your regularly scheduled entertainment. After the release of the plagiarism in YouTube video, some of the people mentioned within that video obviously faced backlash over their actions, but arguably none more so than James Somerton, which is completely unsurprising given just how much of the video was dedicated not only towards his act of plagiarism, but also the things that he didn't necessarily plagiarize, or at least as far as we can tell, things such as his penchant for lying and making up stuff that never happened, or ignoring the facts in favor of spinning his own weird narratives of situations, and his curious and befuddling, rather adamant dislike for women, as it seems, and maybe just kind of maybe a sprinkling hint of transphobia in the mix, potentially, although you can argue with me about that, I guess. It's up for debate, since technically N.D. Stevenson didn't come out as trans until after She-Ra was finished airing, and Rebecca Sugar has she-they pronouns listed on their Twitter, but as we've seen with James, he just tends to copy and paste stuff from other sources, so I guess it's completely plausible that he found an article to copy that discussed them, and it was already misgendering them both, and, you know, either we haven't found the source yet, and he just didn't fact check it, because, as he points out later, he just doesn't fact check things for whatever fucking reason. But, you know, him misgendering both of them and the potential of the transphobia sprinkled in there is why it's really important, beyond everything else, I guess, why it's important to do your own research on topics, because, you could come across as an accidental bigot, I guess, and nobody really wants that, unless they, you know, are an actual bigot. I will admit here that I've only, like, prior to, you know, the scandal and backlash and everything, that prior to everything, that I've only ever actually watched one singular James Somerton video in my life from start to finish, and that was the Disney video that he did that was heavily referenced in Harry's video, the Disney Queens, or whatever it was called, or is called now. Needless context, but a friend of mine showed me the video, and we were discussing the issues revolving Disney having, like, multiple first queer Disney character articles written, like, every time a movie released that year, and how ridiculous it was getting, especially given that some of these, like, first gay ever characters weren't actually explicitly stated to be gay within the context of the film. Like LeFou, for example, from the live-action Beauty and the Beast, bumping into a dude at a dance for, like, 0.2 seconds at the, like, tail end of the film when nobody else is paying attention. It doesn't make you gay, I'm afraid. But yeah, the Disney video, I thought it was alright, I guess. Since I wasn't super educated on the things that he was discussing overall, I didn't really question much of the content, which is why he was able to slip in so much completely fabricated information within the video. It's actually his reliance on people not knowing more about the topics he's discussing, which leads him to have the confidence to not only say whatever the fuck he wants, but also the confidence to steal so much from other queer creators. And I will say this till I'm blue in the face, really, because I say it every other video now, but people generally do not look more into something than what they're initially presented with. So remember to take your goddamn horse dewormer, kids, because apparently that cures COVID. Anyway, as one can imagine during the height of the backlash on the internet, James ducked out as fast as possible and was MIA for a couple of weeks following the grand reveal that he wasn't the academic he led everybody to believe that he was. But the tragedy of making your living off of being online meant that he just couldn't stay away for long. Whenever someone is canceled, for a lack of better phrasing now, they have two options. They can either ignore the issues and hope everything blows over, or they could address the issues head on in a discussion or, oftentimes, an apology video. James opted to post not just one apology video, but two at this point. If you aren't as up to date with internet drama and the cycles of those dramas, I hate to be the one to inform you, but I will. Rarely do apology videos go well in favor of the canceled influencer. Honestly, this phenomenon could actually be studied in like real academic studies, and I would sign up for that class. Basically, what ends up happening with influencers making apology videos or twit longer statements or whatever is that they tend to do a variety of things to take the heat off of themselves without really admitting their faults. Or if they do admit to anything, they kind of just pile on a bunch of other stuff within that video to make themselves out to be the victim or lessen the accusations lobbied against them. Famously, bad examples of apology content would be videos like Colleen Ballinger's ukulele video, in which she kind of like starts to address some things before like victim blaming the audience, and Sienna May's interpretive dance routine where she blames being young with what she did, which is kind of ridiculous. Anyway, Jeffree Star did this like there are bigger issues in the world right now type of apology video where he just slung around the names of a bunch of murdered black people for whatever reason. It was terrible. Shane Dawson saying that he didn't know that blackface was a thing despite building his entire career off of doing it, and James Charles saying that he was sexting teenagers because he was desperate for a boyfriend and that there was no gay men in their 20s in LA for some reason. Honestly, this list of bad apologies could go on and on and on for a while, but I'm not trying to make everybody sit here longer than the couple of hours that I'm probably are going to make you sit through. Obviously, since I'm talking about it, James Somerton's apology videos, at this point, falls into these categories of bad apologies in a variety of ways, but the key issue will be the repeated lack of personal accountability for the actions that have led us to this point. I know I'm really late to reacting and discussing the first apology video, but I wanted to like kind of formulate my opinions a little more than just shouting them from the rooftop as a gut reaction as soon as it happened, which is unfortunately kind of what I'm doing with the second video, but we'll get there. Anyway, be mindful of the content warnings that you get in the beginning of this video, because James starts his apology video off very strongly by discussing committing self-harm, and presumably it was due to the fact that he was facing backlash and he felt guilt over the hbomberguy video. Off script here, but I kind of wonder how Harry feels about James opening up with, you know, him attempting to commit self-harm, just following immediately off of like the tailcoats of his like Harry's video coming out. Like, did he do that to make Harry feel bad about the video? The world may never know. And the only reason why I even mention that, I'm still off script here for a second. The only reason why I even mention if whether or not James was citing like the self-harm attempt in order to make Harry feel bad about making the video, because we've seen repeated attempts now with two other sources at minimum of any time that James felt like he was getting targeted, quote unquote, for like things that he did wrong personally. He would then cite like death threats, harassment, or he would like, you know, dip about his mental health and everything, but I'll get more in depth with that later. So just a thing to ponder, I guess, for now. One minor criticism that has nothing to really do much about like the contents of the video, like what he's saying, but rather like how he's presenting it. He just leaves so much empty air in this video, and it honestly started to irritate me as I continued to watch the video. He didn't edit out any of the times that he just kind of sits there in silence, looking sad for 20 seconds at a time. Like, how much shorter could this video have been if he did any of that? I just want to take a moment, a very sincere and heartfelt moment, that if you are in a position, you the viewer are in a position where social media is making you feel so bad that you want to hurt yourself over it, you need to take a break. Turn off your devices, take a step back, and find something outside of the internet to bring you peace. I don't care what it is. You could read a book. You can rob a bank. You can open a window and get some fresh air. Like, just get off the internet. It's proven that constant exposure to social media is detrimental to your mental health, especially on websites that cater to negative content. YouTube, Twitter, unfortunately, like, especially if, like, you're a part of commentary spaces and everything like that, there's a very real reason why the term doom scrolling exists. And I know for some of us who make our money online, it is difficult to take a break for ourselves, but there are methods that you can utilize to, lessen like the burden of social media on your mental health. Things like self-publishing, queuing content, right? Announcing days off and hiatuses, and just in general, if you have an empathetic audience, if you need to take a break, they will understand. And most likely, if your audience likes you enough, they'll even welcome you back with open arms. Now, I know the self-publishing and announcing hiatuses and everything like that, I know that doesn't particularly apply to James at this point, but I don't wish anyone harm over something as trivial as copying someone else's homework, essentially. I hate to phrase it like that, but it is what it is, right? We can have a big discussion of the erasure of minority voices, queer voices in this instance, and even the profiting from that eraser, but none of that is so criminally dire to warrant someone dying over it. Deplatform, maybe, but dying, no. While I'm sure the people affected by James's actions are deeply hurt and upset over everything, I'm also sure that none of them want James to actually die over his actions. And if you, the viewer, or even one of the people that he plagiarized, actually does want him to die, seek help. It's not normal. I believe overall that James should take a moment to think for himself here, that he can correct his behavior. He can learn from what he's done, and most importantly, he can make things right. In fact, he has a variety of different methods of making amends for his behavior. Without even finishing his first apology video, I wrote down a couple of things that I thought he could do, and somewhere within the mess of the video, I was hoping that he would mention them. So I'm just going to read off some things that I thought could have potentially helped him out in this situation. We'll see later that he doesn't really apply much of this, but here we go. Firstly, and most obvious, he should be compensating the people who he ripped off if he can find them. A big issue with him plagiarizing just so much stuff is that he most likely did not keep a list of his own sources. While it will be painful to do so, he should reach out to whomever he can about finding these sources. hbomberguy, for example, because he just did the big video. Not that I think that Harry really wants to interact with James, but wishful thinking is a specialty of mine at this point if nobody's caught on yet. This very first point might also be difficult for him, even if he did end up knowing exactly where everything he ripped off was from, because it's statistically unlikely that he kept enough money to pay damages to those affected. Then again, he was making a ton of money off of his plagiary, right? I seen numbers floating around that he could have potentially been making 15K or more a month through just YouTube alone. Then you have his Patreon, which was making 4K a month minimum, which I know it's actually probably a lot more, because the 4K a month minimum thing would only be if everybody only subscribed to $1 tier, which is also statistically unlikely. I mean, I have $1 tier that nobody has subbed to, so then you have any sponsorships that he was doing, any merch that he could have been selling. Really, he was probably making the bank, right? You can say that he wasted all of his money on fancy camera equipment and everything like that, but when it comes to that kind of stuff, if you're taking care of it correctly, you only need to buy one and treat it well, right? Secondly, this might be some controversial, so I'm sorry. I'm gonna have a lot of little controversial opinions here, evidently. But not only could he put the sources in his description of his content, but he could also include those credits alongside the video segments where he was repeating what someone else said or did, right? What I mean by this, as the example, because it's what's newest here and what's right in front of our faces, is what Harry did in his video, showing the articles and the other posts that James had copied, where it was from, and also directly linking to those people within the description of his videos where he can. This would require very extensive reworks of the content, obviously, but it's necessary in order to give the spotlight over to those talented writers that had been wronged. Thirdly, and obviously probably most importantly really, is that he should turn off the monetization for all of the videos that contain plagiarized content, which is something that he has rejected the thought of in his second apology video, but I'll get into it. I think he really needs to take a hard, long look at himself and turn off the monetization of not only the videos that have been proven to contain plagiarized content, but also the content that he knows in his heart personally that he plagiarized that other people just haven't found the sources to yet. And fourth, lesser but still critical in my opinion, he needs to trim out all of like the hateful content and the misinformation contained within his videos. This might require a lot of like reworking of the videos for watchability's sake to make sure point A goes to point B instead of just cutting off to point C. But if you're going to try to make educational content, even if it's unfortunately plagiarized, it needs to be correct and factual. And I even kind of want to argue a little bit that educational content also needs to be free of bias. You don't have to rewrite history in order to fit the narrative that queer people have faced oppression and prosecution, because historically, and even to this day, we have and we do. The suffering of queer people also isn't like some contest of which marginalized group of the community has had it worse. When one suffers, we all suffer. And I know I said that controversial opinions and everything, so some of you might argue that he should just take down all of the plagiarized content altogether, but James has a massive platform. Maybe not as big of a platform anymore because of the scandal, but he can still adequately utilize that platform in the future to draw attention to the voices that he's stolen from, as opposed to just never acknowledging them in the first place. Going off script here, because I didn't write it down, but I think this is a very valid point of my point here of him keeping the content up but not monetizing it, right? Is that, let's say that someone that's not internet savvy, that just kind of occasionally watches YouTube, and so they just occasionally click on one of his videos to watch, but they're unaware of the scandal of the plagiarism that's going on right now, right? If he decides to delete his second apology video, like he did the first one, just to kind of like hide everything after the fact, right? Then you have people that are watching his content that, if they're not looking at other sources or reading comments and everything, or if he turns off the comments, how are they going to know he plagiarized things, right? Which is why I think it's important for him to leave up that content just reworked in a way in which it shows where all of his sources are directly in the video that he's copying from, so that people know the voices that he copied from. Like, those people get the attention they deserve, so people aren't just thinking that, oh, James wrote that, James believes that, James is educated in that way, right? I probably should have scripted that out a little better for like clarity's sake, but I think that I got my point across well enough, right? A little rambling. Back to the script. I hope with some major therapy and maybe hiring other people to write and research for him, take like the creative control out of his hands, you know. I think he could come back a better person eventually, just not yet, because his 2 apology videos don't prove that he has like really grasp the issues that are at hand here. But, you know, this all is probably way too optimistic on my end, since with Harry's video examples alone, we saw that when confronted with evidence, and I know I mentioned this a little previously here, James likes to twist things in his favor in order to garner sympathy and support, something I'm positive he literally tried to do with his first apology video due to the dozens and dozens and dozens of pauses and sobbing and, you know, just the sheer reactions that people are having to the video. And one thing that we saw James do multiple times at this point, and I'll show examples like sprinkled in throughout this video, is that anytime that there is an accusation lobbied against him, he kind of just cites that he's getting death threats and doxing and other forms of harassment.
In his post, he explained he was the victim of a targeted harassment campaign, had received death threats, and he hid these videos because he didn't want people who want him dead seeing them. In the comments section, he also claimed the thread's author had been harassing and attacking him for the last 48 hours on Twitter, and her followers had been hunting down his home and work addresses. When he made a video addressing the plagiarism, he titled it, "About Those Death Threats."
Which, while it is actually very likely this could be happening because he's a queer creator online, any kind of apology video is not the place to mention it. In fact, I might argue that you probably shouldn't mention the harassment you receive at all, due to the chance that it could just spark others to also try to harass you. It's kind of like the Streisand effect, maybe. Tell someone not to do something and it makes them want to do it more. Now, personal advice here, when faced with harassment, you should obviously take thorough documentation of said harassment and report it to any kind of authority figure that handles those kind of crimes, right? Additionally, since the police generally suck and don't do something until after you're hurt, or even sometimes they don't do anything even as you're actively being hurt. You should also take all methods to obviously defend yourself as possible, like camera doorbells, household security alarms, Don't open packages that you did not order. I can't believe I even have to say that, but you'd be surprised. Get everything that's influencer related sent to your P.O. box, like fan mail and company PR. If it's illegal where you live, a handgun and a big dog could also be helpful. But also, please note here before anybody gets upset at the mention of guns, that advice isn't directed towards James or anybody else experiencing a mental health crisis that might cause them to want to injure themselves. Because at the end of the day, not only should you take precautions to protect yourself against people harassing you, you should also take steps to protect yourself from yourself. Now, another obvious thing to do when someone is threatening you online is obviously to report them to the sites that they're doing it on. You don't want to give them the response that they want because, like, especially if they're dropping your home address, you're just then confirming that the information that they have is correct. You should never put yourself in danger over some smelly loser thinking that they're Mr. Big Britches for leaking your private information on the internet. On the other side of this, though, flip the coin here, there is the distinct possibility that there was actually no harassment at all towards James. As creators who are receiving backlash over their actions, they often cite harassment as reason why they are absent for a while or to try to garner sympathy. With James opening up this entire video with informing us all of his self-harm attempt, we can see that James's mental health and self-worth potentially just revolves completely around people praising him. And when the image of himself as this researched and oh so smart academic intelligent was, challenged to the point where he couldn't excuse it anymore, his entire world shattered around him. I mean, all I can say beyond get a therapist is that James probably needs to hire a PR team at this point to take over his socials and to help him handle any issues with his platforms in the future. Because it's evident at this point, assuming that the self-harm attempt was real, that he just can't handle the stress from them himself anymore. Regardless of whether or not he was actually getting harassed, the end goal of getting sympathy worked out for me at least, because I do have to take a step back and second guess my initial thoughts of, oh, you're just so full of shit, because it could be invalidating a very real and scary situation that he found himself in. It's honestly really mentally taxing to feel bad anytime any old Joe and Sally come along with a sob story when they do some shit to get themselves into trouble. It's honestly why I can't be an authority figure. I mentioned in previous videos thinking the best of people to be kind of a flaw of mine, in hopes that someone can change and improve, which is why I think James actually could have a pretty big opportunity for a massive comeback if he learned not to play the victim and take responsibility for the actions he not only participated in, but also facilitated others to participate in as well. But as we see in the second apology video, that optimism might be really ill-placed even for my gotta think the best in everybody mentality. Getting back on track with the actual video here, the first real thing that he starts to address within it is his excuse of stating something was, quote, based on the works of bit not being enough to credit his sources.
For a lot of videos, I did the opening titles thing, and I tried to put, this is based on this person's research or this person's book, but I know now that wasn't enough. That wasn't okay. And then there were a lot of times that stuff just got put in and there was no attempt at crediting anybody.
Which is obvious, given he wasn't just using some sources for research purposes. I have a sneaking suspicion that he isn't really comprehending what plagiarism actually means, especially in this situation, which would make sense. How could you begin to comprehend things that you don't even try to write yourself? I honestly think that James could have been the queer icon he really wanted to be while also using the works of others pretty easily. Ask permission, and then make voiceover videos of those things. If he asked correctly to collaborate in this way, he could have continued to even make money off of these videos, given, that he shared the profits with the original creators right from the start. But we've seen now from written, edited, directed, produced, and everything else credits being solely in his name, James wants to be the shining star in the queer community. He essentially just wants to be worshipped. About 5 minutes in, roughly, in the midst of saying just how sorry he was for hearing people that he was plagiarizing, he immediately begins to make it all about himself again. It's almost like he really can't help being the center of attention, something that we will see being repeated in his other video. What's very particular about this, section here is the fact that, his friend or roommate or whatever had left him, apparently due to what was happening.
We lived together for, 7 years? 8 years? We lived together for a really long time. He hasn't spoken to me since this happened.
At least that's kind of what he alludes to in this video, although it's a little contradicted in his, second video by saying that Nick was already not his roommate, prior to the allegations coming out.
This is also when he told me that he'd be moving back to Ontario permanently soon, as he wanted to live closer to family and live in a bigger city with more opportunities. This was a punch to the gut for me.
But who knows what's the truth at this point, right? Now, for everyone who might be here without watching the original hbomberguy, Nick was James's co-writer for his channel as well, and after James had brought Nick onto the channel officially, anytime someone would call him out for plagiarism in the past, James would immediately throw Nick under the bus with claims. Now, I'm kind of paraphrasing a bit here, but he would essentially say, these videos are just so heavily written by Nick, so any claims of plagiarism are claims against Nick. I won't fucking stand for that.
Because if it was somebody accusing me of plagiarism, especially recently, the videos are so heavily written by Nick that they would be accusing Nick of plagiarism. And I will not fucking tolerate that.
Which, okay. Within this first video, and subsequently his second video, really, he actually continues to throw blame at Nick, although, right here in this section, it's a bit more subtly than before. When apologizing for the lies and misinformation, James is almost irritated when he, says, I didn't write that, I should have fact-checked.
I also want to apologize for the misinformation, outright lies that ended up in the videos. I never intended for any of that stuff to be in the videos. In most cases, I didn't write it, but I should have, it was my face on the channel. It was my name on the channel. I should have been more diligent about fact checking and stuff. Because there was a lot of really stupid shit in there.
This could be interpreted both as just in general that he didn't write the lies, misogyny, or false information because he didn't write anything, but then begs the question that if James didn't write those sections, who did? Because if the source he copied the false information from is never found, that just leaves Nick to take the fall on the sore form once again. Honestly, the woe is me about Nick leaving just doesn't pull the heartstrings to me he probably thought it might, which is why I think he cuts himself off from the rambling about that. Leaving him sobbing in off-topic tangents and giant pockets of dead air is certainly a choice for sure. I can't feel bad for him that his friend had left. I know that if one of my friends continued to throw me under the bus every time they got in trouble, I would be pissed. But then again, like I said in his second apology video, he kind of tries to backtrack a bit by saying that Nick had already left prior to the accusations coming out and just now Nick wasn't talking to him. So again, I don't know the timeline of events in Nick and James's friendship, and honestly, I don't really fucking care. I just care about the fact that James continues to throw Nick under the bus and make him take the blame for his actions over and over and over again. After all, this is supposed to be an apology for his actions. I mean, if Nick fucked up, he should be the one to come out and make their own statement in their role in everything. I'm sure Nick is a grown-ass adult, so they can use their own voice for, whatever they might have done wrong. I also want to mention briefly that when he's going on about the fact that he wasn't fact-checking the misinformation, he says that he took it for granted.
It's just so easy to check, and I just never did. I just took it for granted.
Which, I don't know why that made me chuckle. Did you take the ability to just copy and paste without question for granted, or were you taking Nick for granted, filling in the gaps of your scripts with nonsense? I actually think part of what he took for granted was the information already being typed up for him just to steal. He assumed because someone had just published it on the internet that made it true, because after all, if it wasn't true, why was it there for him to steal it, right? Anyway, I saw that they were replacing Thomas Jefferson with Taylor Swift on Mount Rushmore. Someone on the internet said that, so it must be true. All hail the Swiftie overlord, or like whatever people who listen to our music say nowadays. James also goes into thanking Harry for setting up the fund for the creators that were stolen from. Then, after way too long of a pause, he says that he wants to help out.
I want to thank hbomberguy and his team for setting up the fund. I want to help somehow. I don't know how.
Which, if it was true, it would be a really good thing, even if that incredibly long pause and then evidence from later makes it really hard to believe that he was sincere in that, since he's done so much that any sympathy that I might have had for him has slowly started to wane and turn into cynicism. From my interpretation, I think that James will only uphold this claim of trying to help the people that he wronged if his feet are actually put to the fire. During this section of the video of him saying that he really wants to help Harry with the compensation for, his plagiarism victims, he takes a moment to denounce just how much money he was actually making from everything, saying that not only were people just really overestimating how much money he was making, but he was also splitting his income completely 50-50 with Nick.
I've seen a lot of people online saying how much money I apparently make, and they're way overestimating. Beyond the fact that Nick and I split everything 50-50, they're still way overestimating how much money came in.
Welcome back, Nick. Getting blamed again, I see. Regardless of splitting the money with Nick, people could see how much he was making on Patreon alone. I know I did kind of like a little rambling bit before, but I'll say it again here. Patreon specifically has this like little subtitle in your page that says paid members, and it shows you how many people pay for your shit. And sometimes, in the case of mine at least, it'll show you just how much money you are making. Now, I haven't seen, how much money it was, but people did post things on Reddit with like pictures. Like he had like at least 4,000 paid patron members. So even if it was $1 per patron, that's still $4,000 a month, which, to me, being broke as fuck, is a lot of money. But then if you factor in the YouTube ad revenue, video sponsors, the Talos picture funding, any merch he was selling, like, knowing all of this, it's easy to believe that he could have been making that $15K a month or even more at this point. And as unfortunate as it is, James did end up saying within this video that he wants to make his videos public again to collect the ad revenue.
And so I want to thank them for setting up that fund, and I want to help somehow. The only thing I can think of right now is to make most of the videos public again. And every month I can send the ad revenue from all of the past videos, because there were plenty that didn't have any uncredited stuff in them.
Which, okay, but this time for sure, he promised that he's going to send that ad revenue over to the compensation fund for the affected creators, which, right after he was complaining that he was broke and needed to move back home, that's going to be a no from me, really. You can't even be trusted to hold yourself accountable for the numerous accusations against you over the years, and you continue to put the blame on someone else instead. You just don't have any goodwill left to believe that you would give up any money that was owed to someone unprompted. He especially can't just make his own fund to put the new ad revenue into, because that's something he mentioned that he wanted to do.
But I can make them public again, and then every month I can send the AdSense to either I can send it to hbomberguy's team that they can add to the fund, or I can start a fund myself.
Because we've already seen that he doesn't use funds for their intended purpose, key point being the Talos Pictures projects. And again, he starts like going on about things just not being credited correctly, and it's just, say the word, James, please. I mean, I'm glad he does in the second video, but I think he refuses to say the word out loud, at least in this video, because he truly doesn't want to admit what he did wrong. He said sorry for not crediting. He says he didn't write the material, but he has yet to actually say he plagiarized here. This might be kind of nitpicky on my end, especially with being only 10 minutes into this first video, but I really think he's avoiding the word to lessen the guilt of what he did. It wasn't so bad, he just didn't credit people. It's fine as long as he credits them next time. And I hate going into scripts in the beginning hoping for the best, because like the disappointment, like just even rereading some of this that I wrote, it just hurts. It really does. James has like moments, like pocket moments of clarity with the situation, in this video and in the next one, where he mentions putting credits in the description of his videos just can't be enough anymore, which again is obvious. He again is sidestepping the seriousness of the plagiarism accusations by saying that he just never thought anybody would think that he was the one that was going out and doing the journalism himself.
So that anyone watching the video knows where all of the information came from. That it wasn't me going out doing journalism. I never thought anyone thought that I was doing like journalism on stuff. And I don't think anyone did. But the people who actually were doing it should have been given the credit that they deserved. They did the hard work. All I did was edit a video.
Which is not the point to me. To me, at least. He essentially is saying, well, I never thought anybody would think that I got all this information myself, so I didn't mention that I got the information from someone else. That should just be obvious, which isn't how this works at all. 11 minutes in, and I'm honestly just getting a little irritated by him, right? And he didn't even steal shit from me as far as I know. I mean, I only did like one like queer-related video essay specifically, and it got like maybe 100 views or less, so you can tell every time he's about to try to pull something out of his ass, really. Either an excuse, a lie, or something he says he'll do but doesn't want to do. If you said to yourself, do you mean all those sections of empty air while he looks off into the distance before speaking again? Yes, that's exactly what I mean. He goes on to say that he did credit stuff by claiming there were credits in the videos if he was adapting a book. It's especially curious that he mentioned doing so with at least one of the videos that Harry mentioned, and I'm going to butcher the name. It was the celluloid closet video. God, I can't maneuver my tongue like that. But anyway, if you credit the source, why was it that one of the videos in which you were publicly criticized for plagiarism well before Harry's video? Why did Harry mention that video but not the adapted line?
When it was something like the recent history of Hollywood videos, right there in the opening credits, I put Vito Russo's name, that it was adapted from his book, The Celluloid Closet.
James's video, which takes pains to tell you was written, filmed, and edited by James Somerton, also ends by saying it is in memory of Vito Russo. This one line of text is the only acknowledgement of Russo or the documentary in this entire fucking video.
Although, for all that I know, that adapted line could be there now, because James does have a penchant of taking videos down and then editing them, minor tweaks here and there, and then re-uploading them. I mean, honestly, James is making this up, right? At least that's the only interpretation that we, the audience, should have at this point. Because when questioned about another video you had to, quote, adapt from a book, you said that you had permission to make the video before you made it, which was a contradiction from the other post saying that you were going to ask the author of the book after the video had already been up for a while.
Book. She eventually asked him why he didn't credit it, and he responded that he hadn't started crediting source materials yet when he made the video. He then finally added a reference to the book to the description almost 2 months after it had been uploaded.
And that's why before doing the video I got permission from the author to do it. But I did have full permission from him before making the video.
The tweet about how he literally had to take the video down and ask permission afterwards is still up. Anyone can fact check this.
Didn't acknowledge the based on the book by in the comments, so I took the video down and put it back up with the author in the opening titles.
Again, his reply to her where he acknowledged he hadn't and was going to is still up.
You can tell this blank stare into space is his lying face because he did it in all of the live stream footage that Harry used as well, and of course the footage that Jesse Gender also used. I think that James kind of lives by the like old school motto of it's better to ask forgiveness than it is to ask for permission. At least that's my interpretation of everything right now. He goes through great lengths throughout this entire video to avoid saying the word plagiarism. Things like, I didn't credit, I didn't source, I adapted it from a book, I didn't go out and do the journalism myself. I wish that at least in this video he would just say it. Just say that he plagiarized, which I guess he does in the second video, but that second video also wasn't great. Anyway, if anybody has archived copies of James's videos mentioning that he put adapted from citations in. Let me know if he really did include that within the videos, because he hasn't uploaded all of his videos publicly again. And like I said, he has a penchant for like taking videos down, reworking them, and then adding them back up in order to make himself seem like he was telling the truth the entire time, even when he really wasn't. And also I'm too lazy to go and find like a bunch of re-uploads because his videos are way too long for this. I personally believe, as many other people also probably believe, I think he's full of shit. I just don't think that he did that at all, and all you're gonna find is written and produced and directed by James Somerton, and maybe he'll throw in Nick's name around as a scapegoat option as well. Anyway, 15 minutes in, James starts to detail what he wants to do moving forward with making new content, which is an interesting choice, because while on the surface that sounds like something pretty good, I have my doubts due to all the information leading up to this point, as well as information that I got to later. He says that he wants to start making like transcripts in the description of his videos with citations inserted within the script so people can see just where he got all the information from, but like just citing sources once again for the millionth time wasn't exactly the only problem here. It was the copy and paste, the Control-V and Control-C buttons on your keyboard. I mean, sure, it would help just a little bit to make an APA bibliography for your essay, but if you just copy and paste the text in the document, it's still plagiarism, even with the source, if you're not quoting something. Unfortunately, this has to be a cause of we won't believe you can do better until you can show us that you can do better, but at this point, it would be like steep uphill battle, worse than the punishment of Sisyphus in order to regain people's trust and the power your platform used to have. This is a do moment and not a tell moment. Even if you do come back, right, regular schedule and everything like that, people will still be upset with you with your previous actions, even if you say sorry, because that doesn't mean that people have to forgive you. Do better, be better, not for everyone around you, but for yourself. Despite the fact that I think that this first apology video could have been like 5 minutes long, James goes on and on to talk about the comments and stories from people he was reading that mentioned his treatment towards women and the other subjects of the LGBT community, like ace people and bi people and lesbians, insisting again that he wasn't one that wrote those sections with the lies and misinformation about those groups of people.
People think that I hate ace people and women and bisexual people and lesbians, and it's not true. I'm sorry that stuff made it into videos that just shouldn't have been there. Misinformation and lies. I promise you I did not write that stuff.
Which again, who did, James? Who wrote those sections? Also, if you didn't write them, you still read the words out loud, you still recorded the videos, and even after all of that, reading it and recording it, you also edited the videos and left those sections in. If you didn't agree with the content, if you didn't think that way about those groups of people, why did you say it? Why did you keep it in the script? Why? Just make it make sense, James, because I failed all of my college math classes. He more specifically goes into details regarding his comments about ace people, mentioning that he was going based on Nick stuff, that whatever Nick told him about being ace, throwing Nick under the bus again, and then crying that he wasn't trying to do that.
Nick being ace, I know it's kind of like, you know, no two gay people are exactly the same and no two ace people are exactly the same, but I kind of, when it came to that, I would just kind of run with Nick's judgment. And his observations and stuff like that. And I'm not trying to throw Nick under the bus, which a bunch of people were saying that I was setting him up as doing, which is not true.
If you aren't trying to blame Nick for everything, stop bringing him up. Did Nick read out the script? Did Nick record the video? Did Nick edit the video? Did Nick post the video? James, this isn't rocket science. I'm going to write James an apology here. He can have it. I'm giving it to him. I'm giving him permission. James, you can have this. Let's just pretend I'm wearing like the little dapper suit and tie that he likes to like wear in some of his videos. So, Dear YouTube, I plagiarized the work of many creators over the years. These creators range from fellow YouTubers, essayists, journalists, and countless others I cannot even name due to the volume of individuals I harmed with my actions. Of the people I can name, I apologize to, and here's where you would insert the list of names here, fill in the template. I understand my actions were wrong, and I will not repeat the behavior in the future. Going forward, if I'm going to use someone else's work within my videos, like a quote, for example, I will ask permission from the original creator and include all relevant sources within the video and description. I will not, under any circumstance, merely copy and paste the work of others. I will be calculating how much money I made using plagiarized content on my channel, and begin making monthly monetary contributions to hbomberguy's compensation fund. While I am unable to make full contributions upfront, I will continue to send money until all of my debt is paid. I thank hbomberguy for his help in locating the people affected by my actions. He should not have to sacrifice his own time and resources on my behalf, and thusly I will also compensate him and his team for their time. And you can even sprinkle my name around in your credits for pizzazz if you want, James. You're welcome. 18 minutes in, and James is still talking about how he never meant for Nick to take the fall for him. They were making videos too fast, and they weren't putting in the care to make them as they should.
This whole thing, Nick and I were 50-50 partners. It wasn't, I hired him to have a scapegoat or something like that. I never hired Nick. I did not. I don't think those things. I don't think Nick does either. I think it was just how fast we were writing stuff and how fast we were putting videos out it was too fast.
And I am using the plural they in this instance for anybody confused. James just said that he didn't want to use Nick as a scapegoat, but he is once again lumping Nick in with his actions. We were writing the videos too fast. We didn't put the care into them. Are you saying, James, that Nick was also plagiarizing? Is that what you're trying to allude to? Was Nick actually innocent in this mess, or is this a we type issue that you're trying to put up now? My D- in humanities mathematics is staring back at me, so please do the math for me. Another odd mention here is saying that other YouTubers were saying lies about him, but of course not hbomberguy, just to clear things up, that as he puts it.
I've seen a lot of people on social media and other YouTubers even lying about me, but other hbomberguy was not one of them. Just want to be clear about that.
Okay, bud, since you brought it up, even though you shouldn't have, I'm curious, what were the lies other YouTubers have been saying about you? I have no way of knowing without context beyond hbomberguy was the one telling the truth. Was it Todd in the Shadows, the one who put together a video attempting to debunk your misinformation? I know a lot of people ended up watching that video. I think I last saw it at like 4 million or something like that. Or was this lie about the Ace couple, the backers from your Telos Pictures project that gave you like a ton of money? I think they said like $1,500 or maybe $5,000. I don't remember off the top of my head.
So we paid James Somerton 1,500 Canadian dollars.
That is the founder tier that you can still see available on the Telos Pictures Indiegogo page.
Which at the time was the highest tier also. He later, like after he was fully funded, he like somehow added like angel investor, which was even more money, but that was like after he was already funded, and he still has a link on his website where you can still give him that much money. We'll get to more of that. But that was like, what, 1,200 USD about?
It was something like that. I don't have the dollar amount in front of me. I do have the Indiegogo page in front of me, which says 1104 right now, but the Canadian dollars dipped a little bit over the last couple years.
Yeah, it was about 1,200 at the time, I think. We as backers did not hear a damn thing from him for 14 months.
For you to make a movie only to later see that you were saying a bunch of dumb shit about Ace people in a video, and then when they tried to educate you, you kind of blew a gasket about that?
Because in November of 2022, James Somerton released a video called The Queer Erasure of Asexuality. But immediately off the bat, watching this episode, we were like, oh no, we gave this guy money to do Ace Rep. What have we done? There were a lot of blanket statements that were absolutely factually wrong. And not only factually wrong, but very much erasing the real Ace experience, which was the subject of this podcast, was we can't keep doing this to Aces. We shouldn't be erasing them. We decided to not only reach out to James about this, but we wanted to get ahead of some of this because it was within the first couple minutes of the episode. And these are topics we've talked about extensively, and we have shown studies and articles and reports and firsthand accounts of a lot of these discriminations that they are outright saying don't exist. So we also wanted a public statement that's like, here are the studies, here are the facts. He made a very snarky subtweet about how, man, people are so mad that I'm talking about asexuality, lol.
Like, whom is lying about you? He brings up Nick not being a scapegoat yet again, even though he hasn't proven that within this video, and then mentions Telos not being a scam. It's totally not a scam, guys, saying he was going to send out more information regarding what was going on with that company to the backers, throwing in a Starkey, I'm sure it'll end up on Reddit for, like, good measure, which, as we've already seen, since it's been, like, 2 months since this first apology, he hasn't emailed the backers, so there's that. Anyway, I didn't see anything about James actually messaging his backers, like I said. But I did see that Indiegogo, the crowdfunding site that he used to collect the funds for Telos, was investigating him, and that Telos as a company had been dissolved, apparently. Although the Twitter page is still up, and I think James even listed his name as, like, James of Telos in his, like, brand new Patreon that he made. Yes, he made a new Patreon. We'll get there. Trust me, this video is going to be incredibly long. Anyway, one of the comments on the Twitter made me laugh, though, saying that the reason the page was still up was because James forgot the password, which, I mean, there needs to be humor in this situation somewhere. 23 minutes in, and I am wondering if this re-upload I'm watching is slowed down at this point. After he's finished insisting that Telos totally isn't a scam, guys, he never paid himself with that money or Nick with the money from Telos, and he goes on to get very teary-eyed about how much he loved making videos and really wants to make videos again, even if no one will watch them, which, just do it then, I guess. He also mentions that he and Nick made a lot of videos that they just didn't even want to make.
We ended up making a lot of videos we didn't want to make. Because people were asking for them, and so there were a lot of videos we made that we didn't want to make, and I think those videos are very clear on which ones those were.
Which, why? Is it one of your excuses for plagiarizing content? You didn't even want to make the video, so you just copy and paste this shit to get it over with? Maybe it's because, like, I'm a creature of chaos, and if I don't want to do something, I just don't do it, so I don't get why he would make content that he didn't want to make. I mean, this is YouTube. It's not a 9 to 5. You don't have a boss hovering over your shoulder to make sure that you fill that copy and paste quota. You're self-employed. If you didn't want to make the video, just fucking don't. I'm just flabbergasted that this is even something that he said, even if it's not actually a part of his apology per se, but including it within this apology video is even more strange than all the other shit, really. We made them because people were asking us to make them. Just say no thanks. I mean, if they're your fans, they'll understand if you're not interested in something. At this point, I think I should just have pursued a career as a rocket scientist, really. I'd find myself just kind of squinting as he goes into more detail with this section of, we made videos we didn't actually want to make, because he is apparently mentioning a specific video that was for patrons only, but people had issues with what they spoke about within that video.
One of them never got officially released. It was released to patrons. Some patrons have shared it to other people before all the videos went private. And a lot of people hate the analysis that Nick and I did on it. And so maybe it's good that that never got properly released, because maybe it would have hurt people. And I don't want that.
What was the video? Has this video been leaked anywhere? Like, which video are you talking about? You mentioned that patrons probably shared it around, and which video was it? Is he mentioning this mysterious video as a preemptive measure in case someone publishes it and people throw a fit about it later? Is that video also plagiarized? I mean, would they be pissed about the analysis, as he puts it, or because it's more plagiarized content that people can only view if they were paying for it? Is this all in relation to the issue regarding ace people, bi people, lesbians, or just women at large? I'm so confused about the vagueness of this supposed mysterious video. Why did you mention a problematic video existing in the first place? I guess it's a mystery to me forever, because unless one of his former patrons comments on this video and tells me what he's talking about or where to find it, I just don't fucking care. After mentioning this mysterious private video, he goes back into talking about his future plans, listing off some movies he wants to do retrospectives for, which is cool, I guess. Again, I don't think anybody in the audience of this apology video needs to know what your plans are moving forward, because once again, this is a show don't tell type deal. Anyway, his video still has 10 minutes to go. The final stretch here is a lot of summing up previous points he made, which frankly makes this feel just so much longer. I really think this video could have been 5 or 10 minutes tops. He blames the plagiarism on laziness, that he wasn't being malicious, but just lazy.
The part of me that was lazy was the copy and paste part. Instead of just putting it into my words and just citing them properly and giving them credit, that's where the laziness came in. I wasn't trying to be malicious.
It's not a good excuse, especially given just how he never bothered to, edit out the harmful misinformation or the misogyny. And this 10-minute mess, he goes on to say again that any misinformation was due to the place that he copied from being wrong and him not fact-checking beforehand, which I mentioned in the beginning of this video, that if you're going to make an educational content, you need to try to be as factual as possible. Even laziness needs to have its limitations. After all, you continue to say just how much you loved making content. If you loved it so much, why did you not put more care into it? Laziness in the creative process doesn't feel like love. It just feels like the love for money. He mentions wanting to reopen his Patreon, which is something that he did, spoiler alert, so that people could withdraw their tier pledges if they want, which I'm not sure if he did that with his original Patreon, because that one is still down, but he did open a new one. Former patrons of his can tell me if he did or did not in the comments. I don't see any post about him pulling the rug out from people with a surprise charge, so I guess him saying that he didn't want to do that is true enough at this point. He also thanks Harry again for setting up the compensation fund, and that he really wants to help those affected, truly really wants to help them, which curiously enough, I didn't end up, Googling around and searching, and I found this on Reddit that supposedly James had in fact reached out to at least one person he ripped off, offering exposure. Haven't seen if he reached out to anyone else yet, but if he is, and offering the same thing to other people, I can't even form words at this point, especially when seeing the reply in this tweet thread from the original poster saying that James denied monetary contributions because the video with their work was demonetized upon publishing it. The final stretch, the literal actual final stretch of this, is him saying one last "I miss you" to Nick before repeating that he was sorry and he just wants to do better. End scene. Close curtain.
Not true.
I myself originally didn't have a lot of closing thoughts for this that I haven't already said throughout the progress of the video. I will repeat, however, that this is no longer a time of wanting to do better, this is a time of just doing it. Show us all your improvement, even if it means uploading content with comments disabled or whatever. Trust me, if he continues to plagiarize, people will point it out everywhere else they can. He's obviously going to have a lot of heat on him for a while yet, no doubt, but this isn't something so damnable that you can't just make a comeback eventually. Look at other creators who have done far more horrific and serious shit and how they tend to just come back to the internet almost unscathed. Jeffree Star. Anyway, if you decide to make your content public again, just don't monetize it, please, even though at this point he's already doing monetized content. I personally think that ship has just sailed, and use the money gained from new original content to contribute to the compensation fund if you seriously don't have the money to do it now. And also, as much as it hurts, leave Nick alone. My god. If he had left and cut you off, it's not your job to grovel and beg for him to come back. You'll miss him, and he might even miss you to a degree, but if he needs to be away from you, just let him. If the major internet cancellation didn't teach you the lesson you needed to learn, let the loss teach you instead. I believe that he could do better. He just has to prove it. And again, in this first video, he never said the word plagiarism.
Breaking news!
But anyway, I was trying to switch between like present tense and past tense a bit within that first section, right? Because I had scripted that entire thing before the second video came out. So I was just kind of like reading off of my script and be like, oh, whoops, I said a present tense thing, even though it's past tense at this point. But anyway, literally an hour after I finished the script, he uploaded his second apology video, which is wild how that works. Sometimes my friends claim that I'm psychic, and right now this is a little too eerily well-timed even for me. Anyway, strap in, kids, because I'm just adding on to the first script, so welcome to apology number 2, Electric Boogaloo. And immediately upon, like, clicking the video, I realized that it was 43 fucking minutes long. Somebody take the wheel. Right off the rip, we noticed something different in this video than the last one, which would make sense just given the title alone on this one. The first apology video was recorded using his phone, which we know because he made a comment within that video about the phone cutting off midway through making the video and for him to, like, turn the recording back on.
Sorry about that. Phone stopped recording.
This video is titled A Measured Response and is recorded with his more professional equipment, with clean focus on him and the depth of field effect blurring the background. He is the center of attention here, as he wants to be. He isn't shrunk back looking as small as possible like he was in the first video. Based on just seeing that he's not only still has his expensive equipment, but also that he's utilizing it here, that it means that he's feeling much more confident in this video as opposed to the last one. And as numerous people at this point have pointed out, there is no doubt in my mind, or anybody's mind really, that the measured portion of his title is a play on the measured responses videos that hbomberguy does, because he does like a ton of them. I think there's a playlist of like a whole 23 of them at this point, so definitely a play on that. I won't say that he stole the idea per se, but maybe he should have resisted making a reference or a joke to Harry in this video title, because a lot of people are trying to say that he stole the idea and whatnot. But anyway, with the title being measured, I think that means that he has made ample attempts to script this out and rehearse what he was going to say in regards to everything. Jumping on in here, James actually starts with informing us that this video is monetized, which, lovely. And he will contribute the income to the compensation fund for his victims, which would be cool if that was true.
Just a disclosure, this video is monetized, but revenue from it will be sent along to hbomberguy's team to be dispersed to the people whose work I plagiarized.
He already made improvements compared to his last video by outright stating, actually using the word that he plagiarized people. Looked like that break taught him not to be scared of that word anymore, at least, which is a plus. But please note, he's not going to get many more W's from me in this video. Being completely honest, I was a little lenient on how much I reacted to James's first apology video because of how teary-eyed and miserable he was, which I do understand is kind of the point of recording a video like that with no editing and what appeared to be his gut reactions to his actions and the consequences of those actions. He didn't want to admit fault in the video. He was literally just couldn't help himself from making the excuses he did, which is what makes this video so much worse in my opinion. This video has the expensive equipment, like I mentioned before, but it also has, like, editing things like color touch-ups, jump cuts, voice filtering. This video was exactly as the title states, regardless of whether or not it's in reference to hbomberguy. It is measured. Everything about this is intentional. In the beginning section, we're talking about making contributions to hbomberguy's contribution fund. He throws in, if they don't accept it, I'll donate it instead.
If his team won't accept it, I'll be making monthly donations to Wikipedia and Trans Lifeline going forward.
Which, yikes already, and it's only 35 seconds in. By saying this, it's an out he can utilize later. Sorry, victims of my actions. Sorry you haven't been paid. hbomberguy's team rejected my money. I totally donated it though, but I can't show you because I don't want to be doxxed. And you know, at first I thought that, like, I was kind of approaching this video in a little more bad faith than before, but then I saw hbomberguy put on Twitter that no, James actually has not reached out to his team whatsoever in order to try to set up sending them money, which, curious. He also points out and later expands upon that he made some of his content public again, as we've seen now. Videos, he says, that are not at all plagiarized, mentioning that those are the videos that Nick wrote and wanted them up so that Nick would be able to use them on his portfolio when applying to other work beyond just the YouTube channel.
You'll notice that a few of my videos are live again on the channel. These ones don't come from plagiarized content, and for the most part are written entirely by Nick. Nick lost 3 years worth of work when everything on the channel was taken down. And that's simply not fair to Nick. He worked hard writing those videos and deserves to have something to point to when he's looking for new writing work.
Which, good attempt, I guess, but Nick only needs scripts to show that he can write a script. He doesn't need your videos or whatever, I guess. If these videos truly, honestly, and wholly do not contain plagiarized content, I don't fucking care. Make them public again, whatever. I'm just bothered that he's trying to say that he's doing this for Nick, he swears, instead of just saying he's doing it for money, but, at the end of the day, he's risking his own mental health by making videos public again, because he should know that his content going forward for the next few months actually is going to be dogpiled and downvoted and just tore apart in the comments and other forums. So even if Nick is the one that wrote this, he's really subjecting Nick also to all of these bad comments and, you know, dogpiling and harassment, right? Off script here, but I feel like it's kind of a subtle dig and a subtle fuck you towards Nick at this point, because if he forgave Nick, if he wasn't bothered by the fact that Nick cut him off or whatever, why put up only the work that quote-unquote Nick wrote? Because, like I said, at the end of the day, Nick doesn't need these videos up for a portfolio. Nick was doing other things prior to the YouTube channel, like he was writing a book and other things, right? So again, I think that this is a fuck you towards Nick, because he knows that this content is going to get dogpiled and rude comments and a bunch of other stuff. And so if he says, oh, I didn't write it, Nick wrote it, which means that people are probably going to tear Nick apart in the comments if they do end up finding like plagiarized content or anything like that. So just food for thought, I guess. James also goes on to mention that he was sending out apologies to those affected where he could, since many of them didn't have social media presences. He even cites many people were really nice and receptive of his one-on-one apologies, but I did get the screenshot about him reaching out to someone in offering to pay an exposure, and I haven't really seen anywhere else saying that James reached out, which I would think more than just one person making fun of his attempts would mention it. Who knows, though? Maybe other people just didn't want attention drawn onto themselves over this. However, I will say another reason I have a hard time believing people responded well to his attempts is because he goes on to lie in this video pretty blatantly, which I'll get into in a bit. Another aspect that James touches on in these claims is that he wanted to be the only voice in the room in regards to the issues related to the LGBT community and experiences, really. And he talks about how he never wanted to do that, but he also acknowledges that he just couldn't be the voice for everyone within the community due to him being cis, white, and a man, and that he tries to utilize that privilege from him being cis and white and male in order to get more people to listen to him.
I never, ever thought that I was the only voice out there, as some have said, but being a cis white man, I thought I might be able to win over some people who wouldn't otherwise listen, unless it was someone who looks and sounds just like them. And so I tried speaking for everyone. And this was a horrible mistake.
While he does say that in this plan that it never really worked and it couldn't work because no shit it wouldn't work without the original voices of the people affected by the experiences he was talking over, it's actually really telling on its own that he thought that people would listen to him due to him just being a cis white man specifically. He felt that he had a power that others just didn't, and thusly, he obviously massively abused that power when he was silencing the voices of those he felt needed a savior to speak for them. Am I the only one that's sensing a bit of superiority complex here? I'm not a psychologist, so take that with a grain of salt, I guess, but I can't be the only one thinking that way, right? It's also here when he officially brings Nick into things once again.
Nick.
So again, welcome back, Nick. Missed you already. Saying that he wasn't the only one trying to speak for the entire queer community, that Nick was also speaking for the ace community and even the non-binary communities because Nick is ace and non-binary.
This fell upon Nick as well as a non-binary person on the ace spectrum. They wanted to include asexuality and non-binary representation in our videos, but because Nick's experience is not universal, people felt that we were delegitimizing their own experiences because we focused on Nick's.
James treats Nick's experiences as the end-all, be-all for those aspects of queer life, which is ridiculous, as anybody could imagine. No one person is a monolith for an entire demographic of people. If you assume everyone is like one particular person, stereotypes form very easily and very fast. Monolithic thinking in terms of marginalized groups, like in general, is very problematic in even more ways. Example, that weird epidemic of sorts of aggressively but well-meaning white people who insist that people should be offended by things. One key example of this, which is funnier than anything else I could use, are the people who say that the sombrero wearing people in the Mario Odyssey game are offensive to Mexicans, when in reality, many, if not all Mexicans I've ever talked to, they just love those little guys. Another example is the people that think like Speedy Gonzales, like the little mouse character, is offensive towards Mexicans when he's like a symbol in Mexico in a lot of places, so there's that. They want to make sure that people aren't being discriminated against, but by being so aggressive about it, they silence the voices of those that they think are affected. Self-serving hero complexes to a degree, where you can challenge the intelligence of those that you're trying to save. Honestly, this is a topic that could also be studied by itself, but let's get back to James, shall we? James makes a personal apology towards fellow YouTuber called Jessie Gender, and how he was a big asshole towards her.
I was a real asshole.
Despite the fact that I don't particularly see why James is issuing an apology towards Jessie in this video, that is supposed to be about his plagiarism, I find it weird that he's apologizing to Jessie over something that he isn't even clarifying for the audience. Evidently, what happened was that, since I had to fucking look for it, unfortunately, was that James got into kind of a Twitter spat with Jessie and a few other people because he was throwing an absolute temper tantrum that he wasn't invited to become a creator on Nebula. Nebula, for those who don't know, is a video platform specializing in more educational type of content and is invite only to become a creator there. And James was alluding to Nebula being homophobic because he, the singular gay person in the entire world, wasn't invited.
But my issue was the thing that he was kind of dismissing here, which was like him saying that like queer people weren't on Nebula, as well as what Princess Weeks was pointing out, which was that, him also saying that there weren't black creators on Nebula as well.
Of course, other queer creators who are on Nebula, like Jessie Gender, essentially told him to sit down, shut up, and knock it off, and thusly, the back and forth proceeded. Somewhere within this back and forth mess with James and the other Nebula creators like Jessie, he claimed that Jessie's fans had sent him death threats and he had to report those death threats to the police, and that people subsequently thought that he had reported Jessie to the police for those threats.
The next thing that I saw from him was him posting on his community tab where he said, quote, "Despite my attempts to be a positive voice for the community across social media, I see now that the queer community is not a community. A minor disagreement about the activities of a company can turn into death threats, harassment, and a glut of emails sent to my business email after I set my Twitter to private, threatening me even more. One even said they'd accuse me of sexual harassment online to, quote, kill your channel. When things started to calm down a bit today, another person, a major YouTuber's producer, began fanning the flames again, saying that we need to believe the person harassing me, re the sexual assault threat, and when made aware of how wrong she was, switched tactics to try and dig up several-year-old claims of plagiarism from summer 2020, which have been long since dealt with and clarified multiple times. I feel absolutely wrecked by all of this. I spent half of my day dealing with the police and the other half being attacked on Twitter. I've tried to keep my head up, but now I feel like I'm drowning." These are also both the points where he intonated that he had gotten the cops involved in some way, shape, or form, though again, he did not intonate with who the cops had been contacted about. First, her followers send me threats of all kind for which the police are now involved, and now she's setting 43,000 of them after Nick, referring to the 43,000 Twitter followers that I had at the time. The cops have asked that I not speak with anyone involved until they investigate. Can someone tell her to realize what she's doing? This is where I learned that the creator that James had been referring to when he had said someone in their audience had sent him false sexual assault allegations and or death threats and he had had to call the cops on them was in fact me.
Someone who at least claimed to be a fan of Jessie's, did an internet and threatened to kill me. And it did end up that this person had a prior record with the police of violent acts, and they actually lived quite near me.
Now, this is twice now that I've seen without even looking into more evidence of this behavior, that when James is being criticized for his behavior that he does not want to acknowledge, he will cite death threats as a method of redirecting criticism away from himself and rally his fans to attack another creator.
They went ahead and started accusing me of plagiarism. Somebody read their thread and decided to message me some death threats, as you do on the internet. But yeah, that's the situation. That's why someone doxed me and threatened to kill me.
Reiterating, I do not see why he is bringing up Jesse within this particular video specifically, especially 5 minutes into the video. Did he rip off Jesse too? Was there more than just the Nebula argument that he wasn't specifying in this video? I understand that when a creator is facing backlash on the internet, that people are prone to bring up a ton of other past actions to gang up on that one person and make situations far more drastic than what they originally were. Take Lindsay Ellis, for example. She made a criticism about Raya and the Last Dragon, like very briefly on her Twitter, back before you can even purchase more characters than the 280 character limit that people have now. And people threw her, under the bus, made complete fit about everything that she said, even though it wasn't even a lot, and it was just a nightmare. Unsurprisingly, her criticism of the film was actually shared by many Asian creators, but since Lindsay was a white woman saying the opinion, people claimed she was being racist. And then the floodgates just opened to bring up every little mistake and bad joke she ever made since the beginning of her internet career, which was over 10 years ago, and effectively drove her off of YouTube en masse after she uploaded a final video addressing everything people were attacking her with. Either with evidence, rumors, or just things out of context, you name it. Honestly, the entire mess and her video overall was just absolutely heartbreaking. However, this video by James is not structured to be that kind of video to debunk every allegation that's ever been made towards him. This video is supposed to be about his plagiarism, the spread of misinformation, and the ambiguous nature of the could-be a scam of Talos pictures. Where does Jessie gender and you falling out with her land in this recent timeline, really? Jessie actually responded to the name drop in James's video with her own video, in which she goes on to, assuming that the apology is about the Nebula fiasco, like I assumed, and she actually plays clips from James talking about not being invited to Nebula and about that, quote, being gatekeeping.
Have issues with how Nebula, not how Nebula is run in total, but how their, recruitment is run, I guess would be the way of saying it. I don't think it's done. I don't think it goes against the way I kind of think things should be. I'm a big believer in democratization, which is one of the reasons I do like YouTube, where, anyone can make it big on YouTube if, they hit the right thing at the right time.
And I just have to take a step back and rub my temples a little bit at that. Because, sure, you could say it's gatekeeping. But, first, the reason Nebula is invite-only is due to the fact that it's a paid platform. You can't just boot up the page and watch whatever you want like YouTube. Being a paid platform means that they're going to want to cater their content to not only be high quality, but also content that people are actually going to want to watch. An educational creator with millions of subscribers will probably pull more people into the platform than someone with 200K. Secondly, it was alluded to in that another reason that James was not getting his invite to Nebula was because of the plagiarism accusations that have been floating around for years.
Sarah and Jenny put forth the theory that potentially the reason that James was not on Nebula was because of these accusations of plagiarism that were out there.
Nebula, either just aware of the accusations or knew outright that he was plagiarizing as a fact, is kind of unclear, but it would look really bad for them as a company to host paywalled content on their site if it was stolen. They then would be a co-conspirator of the theft in that way. And I also want to take a second here, before going back to James's video, to just say that I am absolutely floored that he would even throw such a public fit about not being invited to be a creator on Nebula, knowing that he was plagiarizing content. Balls of steel. The sheer gall and unmeditated audacity is just unfathomable to me. He literally ends the section about Jesse with, "Anyway, back to the original topic."
But now back on the original topic.
And it just makes me kind of upset because it is clear to me that the apology to Jesse did not need to be in this video. It was a breakaway from the shit he was actually under fire for. If he felt the need to apologize to other people that he had harmed, beyond the people that he was plagiarizing or stole money from or whatever because of the Telus productions being real content or not, everybody is going to call you a fraud. Anyway, he should have put this bonus apology towards the end of the video in its own area and not segued it in between everything else like a bad ad read. When he goes back onto the real topic at hand, he talks about how he used to share works by queer creators on his Twitter, but it didn't do much for those creators that he was sharing because they were already larger than he was. So he felt that he had to share their work on YouTube since that is where his platform was larger than anybody else.
I often shared other queer creators on Twitter, but this was when I only had, 800, 1,000 Twitter followers. And these creators usually had a whole lot more than that. There is a part of my brain that says YouTube kind of went, oh, white male queer, let's push him and, ignore everyone else in the community, whereas people were able to actually discover other queer creators on Twitter and then make their way to YouTube.
And just what a fucking crock of shit. Honestly, seriously, you did not need to share the work of those creators to your platform because even if you were saying their words out loud, you could have quoted, cited, sourced your information back towards those creators, but you didn't. Because you knew and acknowledged in this section that those creators, if they were even on YouTube, did not have the following that you did. You didn't think that you would get caught, which is why when you were, repeatedly in the past, well before Harry's video, you lied, cited harassment, rearranged the details of the claims to make it an issue with the person who was bringing your behavior to light. In fact, you do it again in this video, shortly after the section in which you were actually apologizing for your actions. You were just so damn close, James. I'm really disappointed in you. You say that you got permission from the author of Tinkerbells and Evil Queens to use their book in your video.
In some cases, I did get permission. Like with the Evil Queens Disney video. I'll put the email up on the screen that I got from Sean Griffin, where he did give me permission to publish the video. I sent the finished video to him, and he watched it and he gave me permission.
And you are continuing that narrative that you got permission before you published the video, and as we've seen in Harry's video here,
the next 45 minutes are almost word for word taken from Griffin's book.
Fantasy is often described as a method of escape from the trials and tribulations of everyday reality. Living in a society that has outlawed homosexual desire, categorized it as a medical...
Somerton never mentioned the book or its author anywhere. There was nothing in the credits, the description, no citations, no mention of his name, nothing.
And that's why before doing the video, I got permission from the author to do it. But I did have full permission from him before making the video.
The tweet about how he literally had to take the video down and ask permission afterwards is still up. Anyone can fact check this.
Didn't acknowledge the based on the book by in the comments, so I took the video down and put it back up with the author in the opening titles.
Again, his reply to her where he acknowledged he hadn't and was going to is still up.
And even in your own video, which I'll get to, it's simply not true. Later in this video, James starts talking about experiencing memory loss from a head injury when he was younger. Is that one of these times? Did you hit your head and forget that you plagiarized Griffin first? Then, when someone called you out for it on Twitter, you asked Griffin for permission and then tried to twist the narrative that you had permission before uploading the video? James, please. This video, like the previous one, suffers from the issue of having too much filler. This video did not need to be 43 minutes long. The ad revenue was speaking for him at this point. There's no sincerity within this video because he padded the entire thing as much nonsense as he thought he could link to the situation in order to bloat out the runtime and earn more money. But Minji, he said he'll give the ad revenue to all the people that he plagiarized from. Prove it. I will believe it when I see someone from hbomberguy's team say that he gave them money. I won't believe it from James at all. That ship has sailed in the middle of the Pacific Ocean at this point and sank. Especially with this screenshot here, in which hbomberguy says that no, despite what James has said, he has not reached out to him or his team in order to set up any way of sending the funds over. So, there's that. Also, since I'm being a petty fucking dickhead right now, I have skepticisms for the validity of this email, but I can't actively prove it's fake. But let's actually, for a moment, believe that this email is real. How did you have permission from Griffin to upload the video when the original release date of said video was July of 2020, but this email says September? Take a moment to process that if you need to. You're telling on yourself, assuming that the email is real at this point. Did you mean to say that he gave you permission to make the video public again? With this type of stuff, you just have to be more specific, James. After all, the following large fucking chunk of this video is backstory to what James believes was the lead up to him plagiarizing content, which I don't want to belittle or invalidate any difficult times in someone's life, but the goodwill I have towards him has been fading for the last 12 minutes of this second video, and even longer since the first apology video. I'm so sorry that you grew up poor, but so did I. So do a lot of people. Your economic status doesn't excuse the fact that you were plagiarizing work, doesn't excuse the misinformation or the misogyny or not delivering on the Telos projects. And Nick's inclusion in everything is also not an excuse. You lump Nick in so much with everything that you've done wrong, it's almost like there are growth coming out of your ass at this point. Let Nick come out and speak for themselves. And here, 13 minutes in, James says the plagiarism was due to his head injury.
All of that was already taking up so much of my time and attention. This led to a lot of copy and pasting blocks of text into scripts. My intention at the time was to use these as a jumping off point once Nick and I sat down to edit the script. And here's something I'm sure a lot of people will call a bullshit excuse. I have memory issues because of a head injury from when I was a child.
Fun fact, serial killers are also often cited to have head injuries, but we don't really excuse their crimes because of that, now do we? Oh boy, alright, so he basically says through this section that he was too busy to write a script, so he copied and pasted stuff because he was going to rewrite the stuff to be more original at a later date. But when later came around, he couldn't remember what was already original and what was stolen because he has memory loss due to his head injury.
The part of me that was lazy was the copy and paste part. Instead of just putting it into my words and just citing them properly and giving them credit, that's where the laziness came in. I wasn't trying to be malicious.
James, at this point, I'm no longer going to speak to you as if you're a child. You are a professional video essayist, yes, because you stole stuff, but if you're going to use a source, maybe you wanted to copy and paste the section you needed so you can revisit it later or whatever as a note. You should have also, crazy concept, copy and pasted the URL of the thing that you stole from. You can literally highlight chunks of text in your document and just add a note to those specific sections. And you can have added notes that way or any other number of ways, on paper, on your phone, whatever. You could have added the URLs immediately right in front of the face of the copy and pasted information if you needed to. You said it was because you were lazy. You said it was because you have a lot of other shit going on. And now, out of the blue, it's because you have some anime protagonist type amnesia.
According to my therapist, my not thinking to do that probably stems from my recently diagnosed ADHD, but I don't know if I'm willing to say that, really. Maybe it was, or maybe it was just plain laziness.
James, be completely serious right now. Do you even believe the words that you're saying right now? You keep moving the goalpost, and it's honestly getting ridiculous. Also, beyond the point of this video, you mentioned having epilepsy, which that sucks. It truly does. Genetic epilepsy runs in my family, and several of my cousins suffer from horrific bouts of seizures that require them to be hospitalized. So I've witnessed the effects that epilepsy can have on someone firsthand numerous times. That being said, did your employer specifically state that you were being fired because of your epilepsy? I might not be Canadian, but there is a legal network that will advocate for you if that's the case. Not that it matters at all, since you probably didn't even fight that hard to begin with when you got fired or whatever, or this is completely made up, which is even more plausible at this point. Just a quick click, and I found this epilepsy advocacy page for the Ontario, Canada region that, you're from, that states that there are government funds to cover both the employee and employer in case of an accident while the epileptic person is working. And this article also states that while an employer can, quote unquote, deny insurance, basically, they can essentially help the employee with finding their own insurance outside of the group plan that caters towards their needs. I know this does require some form of cooperation from the employer, often a business or whatever, and that person with the disability, but if you don't try, nothing gets done. But again, I'm not wasting my time with this because the seizures are just squeezed over this memory loss concoction like orange juice on a fish fillet. You concluding that since you couldn't remember that you copied versus what was original meant that you should have just tossed it all out is proof that you are aware of what you were doing was wrong. So why the memory loss, head injuries, seizures, make you unplayable story? Why all of that? I want to be nice. I really do, because I hate being a dick, honestly. It makes me feel like a bad person, but you're making it really hard. Next on his list of irrelevant talking points is the sad story of his mother's death and being fucked over by the life insurance company. This builds up to why he wanted to start Tello's Pictures and makes films, which are right, I guess. How is some company mission statement type backstory helping you out here? Because I'm not computing anymore. 16 minutes into this second video and you fried my brain, if I'm being honest. I'm sorry your mom died. Her last wishes was not crowdfund for a film studio and then do nothing with that money. The people who backed your projects simply do not care anymore why you wanted to make movies at this point. That should have been a selling point in the About Project section on Indiegogo. At this point, they just want either their money refunded or to actually see a film released. At about 18 minutes in, James goes into details regarding the one film project that Harry had alluded to being plagiarized, The Final Girl. James proceeds to try to clarify that the movie was not at all taken from the Final Girl support group novel that he had liked and that Harry had pointed out being similar.
The name and synopsis of Final Girl are extraordinarily close to a book which already exists, The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. I wonder if Somerton is aware of the similarity.
The feature we settled on, entitled Final Girl, was about the lone survivor of a slasher movie type massacre 10 years after the fact, as she was publishing a book about her ordeal, drawing attention from people online convinced that she had actually been the killer all along. In the end, we would find out that the killer was the boyfriend of the girl who the main character had secretly been dating at the time of the killings. And most of the people he killed were, in his eyes, collateral damage as he made his way to our main character, because he was not happy that his girlfriend was cheating on him with a girl.
Look, settle in for a second here, because I can't prove this because I haven't actually read this book. It's just sitting on my Goodreads TBR shelf, right? But it does sound similar to the Final Girl project James was trying to do, minus the queer elements, of course. That book is actually called Final Girls by Riley Sagar. The Final Girls by Riley Sagar is about the main character, Quincy, a final girl survivor from a campsite massacre that happened 10 years ago. Sound familiar? After settling into a normal life, she's reminded of the tragedy that she endured when other final girls from other incidents start turning up dead. Now, skip ahead to this timestamp if you don't want spoilers for this book. I really didn't want the spoilers either, but, I needed to look up just to be a little more sure of what I'm claiming here, just for the sake of the video, even though, again, I haven't read the book, so I can't be 100% sure, but anyway, to Wikipedia here. It's revealed that the murderer was actually the cop who saved her from the original massacre, in which he had killed everyone because he was obsessed with her. Also within this synopsis, according to Wikipedia again, Quincy and her boyfriend had cheated on one another, and that sparked the conflict enough to make Quincy try to kill another girl, although unsuccessful. So there are aspects within this more detailed spoiler-specific synopsis that also sounds kind of familiar to what James was trying to pitch here. But again, I have to read the book to be 100% sure, but like I said, it sounds familiar enough to James's spiel, right? We'll never know the true extent of any similarities between this book, the Final Girl Support Group, or the script that James had unless that he leaks it or someone else has access to it, right? Honestly, at this point, I frankly do not care if James's Final Girl thing was plagiarized or not because he abandoned the concept.
When Nick got back, He believed that the script needed a page 1 rework. This is also when he told me that he'd be moving back to Ontario permanently soon.
He's right, for once, that the concept of a final girl is an old and worn-out trope. The issue with Telos is the lack of final projects, and as James continues to go into why nothing had gotten done with anything related to Telos, when we all get past all of the bullshit filter about moving to stay close to Nick like a leech, it's all summed up to this very plain and simple fact. James decided he wanted to make a movie and did absolutely no research past the idea of how to make that happen. The reason people were scoffing at a $3,000 price tag wasn't because of paying yourself or the actors. It was actually because you need a lot more than that to make a film. You need a professional film equipment that more than just a fancy camera and studio lights. You need editors, lighting experts, sound engineering, a director, a producer, and that's not even a scratch on the iceberg at all. There's a reason why, like, when you go out to see a movie, the credits list is like 1,000 pages long. Even the final amount of money that he got through Telos, which I think was like 60 or 80K, wouldn't have covered nearly enough of the cost for a short film, and definitely not a full-length feature film. Like a lot of other things going on here, James saw the dollar signs and his apparent memory loss kicked in, and he forgot common sense. And he goes on, my god does he go on, about the reason he was uploading a bunch of pointless fake movie posters was just to try to show people that he was kind of working on stuff for the company, which didn't prove anything. Buying stock photos and slapping text on it and saying coming soon is not showing the work you've actually put into those projects. What about things like character introductions, script teasers, music score development, storyboards, literally anything? He also mentions another film he wanted to do, but says that while he was working on it, it was approaching wintertime, but the movie needed to be set within the summer. And I just want to take a moment and stare like into the void, and the void stares back. How much time does James think it takes to make a movie? Instead of being like, I can't write in the winter, and abandoning things as soon as he picks them up, he should have focused on actually writing and finalizing the script of the project. Get other details together beyond just the filming, like hiring anyone else besides actors as an example. Although, really, he could have actually started hiring actors anyway, so they could, like, practice their fucking lines or something, do rehearsals before it was the right time of year you wanted. There's just so much to do prior to filming that you actually need to do before you start. If he put his nose to the grindstone and did the fucking work without wanting an instant reward for it, he could have had a film ready by the summer if he really tried. James grossly underestimated just how much time he needed to make a film because all he has known for as long as we can tell right now is stealing pre-made content and then slapping his name on it so his stuff can go up really fast after thinking of the concept. Or, you know, he stumbled across the articles and didn't actually think of the concepts, but anyway. Also, not to be like an even bigger stick in the mud here, but I'm going to be, but don't blame Nick moving for any of this. You don't need to move to be closer to Nick. Yes, I know it hurts to be away from your friends, especially a best friend, but you guys could visit each other in scheduled intervals. He could still work for you via online meetings like Zoom or Discord, FaceTime, or any other plethora of methods at this point. You said you had so many connections in Ontario, so why would you then leave to do the project somewhere else? It just doesn't really make any sense. Again, I should have been a rocket scientist because apparently I'm a fucking genius. He goes on to outline all the other little projects he wants to do, which a piece of advice from me to all of you watching, including James if he stumbles across this. I too am a chronic start and stop type of person when it comes to projects. I'll admit it. I have multiple comics I haven't updated in years, plushies sitting half done on a shelf, and my work in progress folder for my art is larger than the finished folders. So my advice is, don't. The more work you pile up onto yourself, the less work overall that you're going to get done. He cited one reason for his plagiarism, no matter how untrue it could have been, was that he was just getting pulled in every other different direction from having too many things going on all at once.
Maybe I thought that this was somewhere that I could cut a corner because I was torn in so many other directions. Honestly, I can't remember, like I said. Memory issues.
Focus on just one thing. And if you can't, because you claim ADHD somewhere within this mess, I'll have to find the clip.
According to my therapist, my not thinking to do that probably stems from my recently diagnosed ADHD, but I don't know if I'm willing to say that
really. Maybe it was, or maybe it was just plain laziness.
But if you can't focus by yourself, get someone to help you set goals and keep you on track for those goals. In addition to like seeking out medicated help if you really feel like you need it that bad. But, I'm not your doctor. I'm not your therapist. Then again, I shouldn't get too preachy about what he should and shouldn't do about his upcoming projects because, again, him bringing up new projects or other shit he wants to do in the future is entirely irrelevant to everything within this video. An apology should just be that, not an itinerary for your year moving forward. I'm not sure what's not clicking for him, really. It's like he just can't help himself from making everything about himself. He's getting the attention he wants now, but he keeps trying to deflect because the attention isn't coming from the form that he wanted it in. Also, isn't it so funny that he says he was conveniently in the process of actually for real totally working on a film when suddenly those plans were just dastardly derailed because of Harry's video, as if Harry's video made you not give your backers updates for months on end?
We'd had a meeting about it, and we were talking about how best to move forward, how fast we could get the script written, how long it would take to cast, how soon we could start shooting. We knew that it had been a while since the initial funding of Telos came in, and we wanted to get something concrete out as soon as possible. After the meeting, we went to dinner, and while at dinner, I started getting messages about the hbomberguy video.
James goes on to rehash points that he already mentioned, either already within this video or points from the previous one, before leading right back around to his attempt at self-harm and alludes to the method in which he tries to use, which I hate him for this because the way that he uses this self-harm attempt to try to deflect from his actions, the way he's using this issue as a means to have people feel guilty for criticizing him for his actions, it just makes me feel like shit for, potentially, like I said, invalidating him. Should I feel bad about your depression, that you felt so bad about your actions that it led to that? Or should I view this as the deflection method that it probably is? I just don't know. He also goes back into mentioning that people wanted him dead so badly that they showed up to his house over Harry's video.
Seriously unstable group of people who watched the plagiarism in YouTube video and thought, well, he should be dead. And they did find my address. And at least a couple of them showed up while I was at the hospital.
That even more conveniently that your gracious and wonderful neighbors called the cops on them. I frankly have a hard time believing this because as someone who has been harassed for a while, when someone wants to hurt you, they aren't going to just show up at your house once and then give up when you aren't home. They're going to come back again and again and again in order to catch you at home. I also want to state this that Jessie Gender actually stated. I'll insert the clip, but I also want to say it aloud to myself because I think it's a completely valid point that she makes. But you keep citing, filing all these police reports, either you do or your neighbors do or whatever. Show them. Where are they? Prove it.
And I guess what I have to say is, before I could even begin to think of accepting an apology, what I would want is to see the police report that he says that he filed.
Are you able to do that in Canada? I don't know. We're able to do that here in America, but whatever. Anyway, he goes into the topic of his plagiarism again and how he is making videos live again on his channel for Nick, and I already got into that earlier, and that the plagiarism is being edited out of past content so that it can also go up again, which I guess is the only game plan he's made that seems kind of to relate back to the original claims in a real and tangible, provenable way, I guess. He brings up the misinformation here as well, pretty much confirming my thoughts from earlier that some of the misinformation from his previous videos was still plagiarized content, but he never fact-checked it before hitting copy and paste into a script. And then it truly, in an astonishing turn, I've mentioned this before, James self-promotes a new Patreon.
So I'm going to start from zero. I have put together a new Patreon account. So if you want to support my documentaries about gay history, fantastic.
What a time to be alive. Instead of looking into his Patreon to see, whatever bullshit that he's up to, wink, wink, you could check out mine if you're 18 or older. I draw things. Anyway, towards the final stretches here, thank God, James summarizes all the excuses he'd given throughout this entire video and then concludes that all of these excuses he kept repeating were not reasons to plagiarize, and now, since he's been caught, he's super-duper sorry and it won't happen again.
There is no excuse for what I did. There are lots of people who make videos on YouTube. There are lots of people who make podcasts, TV shows, movies, documentaries, who have shit going on in their lives that's very stressful. And they don't plagiarize people's work. There is no excuse for what I did.
Then he tries to revise history a little with saying one more time that this video was based on the works of this book, even though that was debunked before he finally ends with him wanting to do the work this time to actually make his own content. Sure. End scene, curtain close. All right. Since I'm thoroughly irritated, my own closing thoughts on his video. Case in point, obviously, it was not great. I've mentioned a few times within this video now that James can't really help but make things about himself. He did make some strong points and improvements from the last video, I'll give him that, like finally stating outright that he plagiarized, using the word plagiarized, the work of others, how he did it, how it was wrong, and what he can do to correct that behavior in the future. All of that, by itself, would have made this apology a lot better. The issues, however, are all the unrelated stories buffered in to try to explain the reasoning for his actions, something most people, honestly, coming into this video sadly do not care about at all. Yes, it is sad that those things happen, but even you acknowledge that none of those events are a valid excuse on why you plagiarize the content from other creators to begin with. Trying to cite epilepsy and memory loss was also pretty wild, considering you're trying to say that it affected your abilities as a writer for your content, but we don't know how much of that condition affects you in any other long-term way. I can't say if you even mentioned the epilepsy before on your channel because, like I said in the beginning of the video, I've only ever fully watched one video by James, but that being said, there are quite a few comments made on Twitter and Reddit and other social media sprinkled around that all claim that James has never mentioned a head injury, epilepsy, or memory loss in the past. Sincerely, if he had just left the video at "I plagiarized, I'm sorry, I won't do it again," people wouldn't have loved it, but it would have seemed much more sincere than the tales of a mother's final wish was to make movies and I was dropped on my head as a baby. James wants to be an online creator, obviously, since he keeps bringing it up over and over and over again, but I think that he's too desperate for that to be healthy at this point. If he can't take accountability for his actions in the circumstances of just plagiarizing, which despite all of the hurt feelings involved is actually pretty tame as far as like internet scandals have gone the last few years, how is he going to respond if he ends up doing something worse down the line? In Jessie's newer response video to James, she brings up screenshots of James citing that someone was going to falsely accuse him of sexual assault of all things.
A minor disagreement about the activities of a company can turn into death threats, harassment, and a glut of emails sent to my business email after I set my Twitter to private, threatening me even more. One even said they'd accuse me of sexual harassment online to, quote, kill your channel. He states also at one point that someone tried to falsely accuse him of sexual assault, which is weird to me because he says it was a woman who did that, and he is a publicly known gay man.
What would have happened if that accusation did go public? Because if you responded to someone with claims like that, like the way that you've responded to all of this in the same manner, you have a lot more to worry about than people no longer watching your videos, buddy. Going into the first apology video, I admit that I was a little lenient on James, or at least I was in the script. I don't know how much leniency came across verbally as I was reading it and trying to correct some of the information in it because of the second video. His tears and choked voice worked in a way that it was supposed to in order to garner sympathy from viewers as far as I'm concerned personally. I still knew from then that his apology was bad, but I gave it a touch of grace because it seemed pretty impromptu and more reactionary, so despite still being bad excuses, throwing Nick under the bus a lot, he just seemed more sincere there than this second video. It's probably the nature of this video being more scripted, filmed on better equipment, edited, polished, and finalized, makes everything ring a little more hollow as he leans away from the apologies and dives into the woe is me about moving his mother and self-promoting his Patreon. I feel like it's only a matter of time before James does something else to land him into trouble, whether that's more plagiarism, not giving the money to the compensation fund, or never releasing anything for his films. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. At the end of the day, it wasn't laziness or moving across the country or time constraints to push out as much content as fast as possible. This issue has always been about one thing, and the time frame in which both of these videos lasted, like over 34 minutes and then 45 or 43 minutes or something like that, like incredibly long videos. We all know what this has been an issue of, and it's been greed. Plain and simple. Anyway, any new developments, drop them in the comments. Remember to like this video for the algorithm and subscribe if you want to see more of my ramblings. This video, like all of my content, is brought to you by Patreon, so thank you so much to Ippo, Ashley, Mel, Alec, and Brandy for subscribing. A link to my Patreon and other socials can be found in the description. Anyway, what a doozy of a video, am I right? This is Minji, signing off. Until next time.
Never at home, need to be strong, every breath hold, 'cause I can't move on till I let go.
Usually doing multiple edits because of YouTube copyright issues.